bless you and welcome. We're at session 2 of the Babylonian Captivity, and we're going to be investigating prospering in captivity by doing the will of God. See, the Old Testament records, the Old Testament records inform us that many of the people of Judea and Jerusalem would be in captivity for 70 years. They'd been carried away as captives by the Babylonians, and the city of Jerusalem had been plundered and destroyed, including the temple and the walls that surround the city. Just because one goes into captivity as a slave, God does not forsake his people or cannot prosper them. They did have to obey his promises, though, which could be difficult when living amongst those who have different beliefs. When the Gentiles became Christians, they had to change their core belief systems. However, they held on to certain pagan beliefs that got commingled with Christianity. Syncretism is the term used for incorporating different belief systems. Gnosticism, which utilized Greek thought, was intermingled with Christianity during the latter part of the first century, thus adulterating true Christian doctrine. People in captivity tend to stray from their beliefs to accept the gods and the ways of their rulers. When God told Abram to leave his homeland and go to another land, he voluntarily obeyed. He traveled on behest of God. These, at the time of the Babylonian captivity, did not go voluntarily, but God did not forsake them while they were in captivity. Genesis 12, verse 1. Let's see Abraham or Abram. The Lord had said to Abram, 12:1, "Get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, unto a land that I will show thee. And I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee, and in thee shall all the families of the earth be blessed." Now, Deuteronomy 28 lists the huge differences between God's blessings and his curses. God promises to bless Abram mightily if he obeyed, which he did. Verse 10, "And there was a famine in the land, and Abram went down into Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was grievous in the land. And it came to pass, when he was come near to enter into Egypt, that he said unto Sarai his wife, Behold now, I know that thou art a fair woman to look upon. Therefore it shall come to pass, when the Egyptians shall see thee, that they shall say, This is his wife, and they'll kill me, but they'll alive. So here's what I need you to do. Say you're my sister, that it may be well with me for thy sake, and my soul shall live because of thee." And actually, she was his half-sister. "And it came to pass that when Abram was come into Egypt, the Egyptians beheld the woman, that she was fair. The princes also of Pharaoh saw her, and commended her before Pharaoh, and the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house." Now, if you were going into Egypt at that time, they had what was called the Prince's Wall. All right, it wasn't like the Great Wall of China, one continuous wall, but they had different checkpoints set up systematically so people couldn't just come and go into Egypt. So they would come there, they'd say, well, state your business. You're bringing any, fruits or vegetables into the land or anything like that, and they would let them in. Well, that's where they saw Sarai and commended her to Pharaoh. "And he entreated Abram well for her sake, and he had sheep and oxen, and he asses and men servants and maid servants and she asses and camels. And the Lord plagued Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. And Pharaoh called Abram and said, What is this that thou hast done unto me? Why didst thou not tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say she's my sister? So I might have taken her to me to be my wife. Now, therefore, behold thy wife, take her and go thy way. And Pharaoh commanded his men concerning him, and they sent him away and his wife and that he had." See, this ensured the safety of both Abram and his wife Sarai. Abram was very prosperous because he did as God asked. So he was blessed by God as his nephew Lot was. Genesis 13, verse 1. "And Abram went up out of Egypt, he and his wife, and all that he had, and Lot was with him into the south. And Abram was very rich in cattle and silver and in gold. And he went on his journeys from the south, even to Bethel, unto the place where his tent had been at the beginning, between Bethel and Ai, unto the place of the altar, which he had made there at the first. And there Abram called on the name of the Lord, and Lot also, which went with Abram, had flocks and herds and tents. And the land was not able to bear them, that they might dwell together, for their substance was great, and that they could not dwell together. And there was a strife between the herdsmen of Abram's cattle and the herdsmen of Lot's cattle. And the Canaanites and the Perizzites dwelt also in the land. And Abram said unto Lot, let there be no strife, I pray thee, between me and thee, and between my herdsmen and your herdsmen, for we be brethren. Is not the whole land before thee? Separate thyself, I pray thee, from me. If thou wilt take the left hand, I'll go to the right. If thou depart to the right hand, I'll go to the left. And Lot lifted up his eyes and beheld all the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, even as the garden of the Lord. So that's pretty interesting that it's being equated. It was so watered. There was so much, it says it was well watered, just like the garden of the Lord. That's the Garden of Eden. Like the land of Egypt also is, as thou comest into Zoar. Then Lot chose him all the plain of Jordan, and Lot journeyed east, and they separated themselves to one from the other. Abram dwelt in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelt in the cities of the plain, and pitched his tent toward Sodom. But the men of Sodom were wicked and sinners before the Lord exceedingly. So he used his five senses to see a place that looked very well, but didn't check in with God to see what the people were like. And they were known as being wicked and sinners before the Lord exceedingly. Living in the land of Sodom was not healthy for Lot, but God still protected him. In Genesis 14:11, the five kings came and, it says they took all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah, and they took all their food and went their way. And they took Lot, Abram's brother's son, who dwelt in Sodom, and his goods, and departed. And there came one that had escaped, and he told Abram the Hebrew. For he dwelt in the plain of Mamre, the Amorite, brother of Eshcol, the brother of Anar, and there was confederate with Abram. And when Abram heard that his brother, his kinsman, was taken captive, he armed his trained servants, born in his own house, 318, and pursued them unto Dan. Now, Dan is an oasis in northern Judah. So that would be a logical place that after you were plundering and doing battle, you would rest for a while here in Dan. But it's interesting that Abram had trained his servants. He trained them in the art of Jehovah, and he trained them in the art of warfare. And the 318 of them went with him, and he divided himself against them, he and his servants, by night, and smote them and pursued them to Hobah, which on the left hand of Damascus. And he brought back all the goods, and also brought again his brother Lot, and his goods, and the women also, and the people. Later, God saved Lot and his family when fiery vengeance was taken on the five cities of the plain, which included Sodom. There is a great overview of what life in Sodom could do to one, recorded in 2 Peter. And this is a great heed of advice for anybody. 2 Peter 2:6-9, from the Working Translation. And we read, and if he condemned the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, turning them into ashes with a catastrophic overthrow, making them an example for those who are going to be ungodly. So if you're going to be ungodly, God would liken you into Sodom and Gomorrah. We know that he likened Judah before they went into captivity in the Sodom. Not a good thing. And if he delivered the just man Lot. So God is calling Lot a just man. And he also says that Lot was worn down by the manner of life, by the lawless and unbridled lust. He was worn down by where he was living because of lawlessness and unbridled lust. For by what he saw and what he heard while he lived among them, that just man was torturing his just soul with their lawless works day after day. So day after day, he was conducting business, he was doing things, and he was being tortured because he was a just man, and he saw and heard the lawless works of the people in that area, and it just wore him down. Then the Lord, verse 9 says, then the Lord does know how to deliver the godly, and he certainly does. God can deliver the godly out of temptation, and how to preserve the unjust for punishment in the day of judgment. See, after that, let's look at another record. Abraham's son Isaac had a son named Jacob, and Jacob spent 20 years serving his mother Rebekah's brother Laban for his wives and flock. But while there, God prospered him greatly while he served Laban those 20 years. Genesis 28:1. And Isaac called Jacob and blessed him and charged him and said unto him, Thou shalt not take a wife of the daughters of Canaan. Well, we know from the record of Solomon how important it is for the Christ line to marry within the believer's household. Verse 2, instead of taking a wife from the daughters of Canaan, arise, go to Padam Aram, go to the house of Bethuel, thy mother's father, and take thee a wife from thence of the daughters of Laban, thy mother's brother. And God Almighty bless thee, and make thee fruitful and multiply thee, that thou mayest be a multitude of people, and give thee the blessing of Abraham to thee, and to thy seed with thee, that thou mayest inherit the land wherein thou art a stranger, which God gave unto Abraham. So Isaac sent away Jacob. He went to Padam Aram unto Laban, son of Bethuel the Syrian, the brother of Rebekah, who was Jacob's and Esau's mother. Jacob went, but was not treated fairly by Laban, Rebekah's brother. However, God made sure he was fruitful in family and in wealth during the 20 years he was with Laban. And now it's time for him to return. Genesis 31:3. And the Lord said unto Jacob, Return unto the land of thy fathers and to thy kindred, and I will be with thee. So up until now, he'd got no guidance from God except to stay. Go, get a wife, and stay. Now the Lord says it's time to leave. And Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to the field unto his flock, and said unto them, I see your father's countenance. It's not toward me as before, but the God of my father has been with me. And he also told him he would still be with them later on. And you know that with all my power I have served your father. I'm guiltless. I'm clean. And your father has deceived me and changed my wages 10 times. But God suffered him not to hurt me. God kept me and you and the rest of our family from being hurt. But he kept deceiving me. 10 times he changed my wages. Verse 38, this 20 years have I been with thee. The ewes and the she-goats have not cast their young, and the rams of the flocks have I not eaten. That which was torn of beasts I brought not unto thee. I bear the loss of it of my hand. Didst thou require it, whether stolen by day or stolen by night? Here he's addressing Laban at this time, because Laban chased after him. And he's sticking he's putting his case out. Thus I was in the day the drought consumed me, in the frost by night, and my sleep departed my eyes. I worked hard. I worked honestly. I cared. Thus have I been 20 years in your house. I served you 14 years for your 2 daughters and 6 years for the cattle, and you have changed my wages 10 times, and don't deny it. Except the God of my father, who's the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had been with me, surely you'd sent me away empty. God has seen my affliction and the labor of my hands and rebuked you the other night, which he did. And so Laban had to let him go. But here, Jacob made his case, a very true case, and God did make sure he left with plenty. Let's look at Joseph and Daniel. When they were enslaved, they rose to great prominence because of their stand for the true God and the proper utilization of spirit. They both are fine examples of God's providing for his people, and it certainly wasn't without challenges, though. Acts 7, verse 9. Stephen is going to give a history lesson to the Jews, and he's going to cover this part. And the patriarchs, moved with envy, sold Joseph into Egypt, but God was with him. Joseph was sold into Egypt like as a slave, but God did not say, oh, sorry, you're a slave. I can't work with you anymore. No, God was with him through the whole thing. And the patriarchs, the reason they did it was because they were envious. That's not a good reason to do something out of envy. And they delivered him out of all of his, God delivered him out of all of his afflictions. Did he have afflictions? Yes. But God delivered them out of all the afflictions. In the sight of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and made him governor over Egypt and all his house. Now there came a dearth over all the land of Egypt and Canaan, and great affliction, and our fathers found no substance. But when Jacob heard that there was corn, wheat, food in Egypt, he sent out our fathers first. And at the second time, Joseph was made known to his brethren, and Joseph's kindred was made known unto Pharaoh. Then sent Joseph and called his father Jacob to him, and all his kindred, 75 souls. So Jacob went down into Egypt, and that's where he died, he and all the fathers, all his sons. And he was carried back into Shechem and laid in the sepulchre that Abraham had bought for some of money of the sons of Emor, the father of Shechem. But when the time of the promise drew near, which God had sworn to Abraham, the people grew and multiplied in Egypt. And they were continuing to do that until another king arose who did not know Joseph. The same then dealt subtly with our kindred, and evil entreated our fathers, so that they cast out their young children to the end that they might not live. In which time Moses was born, and instead of being cast out, he was exceeding fair and got nourished up in his father's house for 3 months. And you can go read the rest of the record there in Exodus. But Joseph had the Spirit upon him and listened to God. And despite many setbacks, God prospered him everywhere he went because he listened and obeyed the voice of the Lord. Genesis 39, verse 1. And Joseph was brought down to Egypt. And Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him out of the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down thither. And the Lord was with Joseph. And Potiphar became a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. And Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him, and he made him an overseer over his house, and all that he had he put into his hand. And it came to pass, from the time that he had made him overseer in his house, and over all that he had, and the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. And he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he knew not aught what he had except the bread that he ate. And Joseph was a goodly person and well favored. So it got to the point where Potiphar just turned it all over to Joseph, and every deal that Joseph made, every trade, every investment, everything went real well. And he would show up from work, and there was great food on the table. And he kept seeing more and more things around the house, more and more animals and all of that. And he just said, great, go to it, Joseph. You're doing a wonderful job. Unfortunately, Joseph ran into, shall we say, some political complications, and he ends up in prison through no fault of his own. Genesis 41:14. Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon. And he shaved himself and changed his clothing and came in unto Pharaoh. The Egyptians didn't like facial hair, and so that was a smart move to make him look respectable. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I have dreamed a dream, and there is none that can interpret it. And I have heard say of thee that thou canst understand a dream to interpret it. And Joseph answered Pharaoh and saying, it is not in me. It isn't because I'm so great. God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace. Look at Joseph's meekness. He's giving God the glory. He's not taking credit. He could have named his price right then, but he said, God will give Pharaoh what kind of an answer? An answer of peace. 37, chapter 41. And the thing was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of his servants. If it's good in Pharaoh's eyes, it's usually good in the eyes of his inner circle. And Pharaoh said unto his servants, can we find such a one as this is? A man in whom the Spirit of God is. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, for as much as God has showed thee all this, there is none so discreet and wise as you are. Thou shalt be over my house, and according unto thy word shall all my people be ruled. Only in the throne will I be greater than thee. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, see, I have set thee over all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh took off his ring, the signet ring from his hand, put it on Joseph's hand, arrayed him in vestures of fine linen, gave him great new clothing, put a gold chain around his neck, and made him to ride in the second chariot which he had. And they cried before him, Bow the knee! And he made him ruler over all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I am Pharaoh. Without thee shall no man lift up his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zachnath-Paaneah. And he gave him a wife even, Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On. And Joseph went out over all the land of Egypt. And Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph went out of the presence of Pharaoh and went throughout the land of Egypt. He's 30 now. He's second in command. He's going to live to be 110. So for the next 80 years, he was in a position to help God's people when they'd come into Egypt. So in around 13 years, Joseph went from household slave to second in command in the greatest nation at that time on earth. Why? Because he walked in meekness with God and recognized his voice and had the boldness to speak on God's behalf. Even other nations recognized him. When Joseph made himself known to his brothers, he again gave God the glory for God's foreknowledge to save his people, which held the Christ line. The Christ line was going to come through one of them, in fact, through Judah. But the point is that he didn't hold them responsible. He didn't seek revenge. In fact, they're going to be really scared once the dad dies because they were expecting revenge at that time. But again, he sees the bigger picture, how God works and how God worked there. Genesis 45, verse 5. Now, therefore, be not grieved, nor angry with yourselves, that you sold me hither. For God did send me before you to preserve life. That was part of God's picture. I had to come first. God had to establish me to preserve your life. For these 2 years hath the famine been in the land, but there's 5 more years to come, in which there shall neither be earing nor harvest. And God sent me before you to preserve you a posterity in the earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So now it was not you that sent me hither, but God. Yes, you carried out what you thought. Well, let's just continue to read. But God is the one who sent me. And he made me a father to Pharaoh. That's important. He's 30 years old, roughly now. And he has made me a father to Pharaoh. Pharaoh was older. Pharaoh was in charge. But Joseph is in a position to act like a father figure to Pharaoh. And he also has made me lord over his whole house, a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt. See, all of God's people are being taken care of in the land of Egypt. Verse 16 of chapter 45, and the fame thereof was heard in Pharaoh's house, saying, Joseph's brethren are come, and it pleased Pharaoh well and his servants. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, say unto your brethren, this do ye, lade your beasts, and go, get you into the land of Canaan. Take your father and your households, and come unto me. And you know what I'm going to do? I will give you the good of the land of Egypt, and you shall eat of the fat of the lamb. Now thou art commanded, this do ye. Take ye wagons out of the land of Egypt for your little ones and for your wives, and bring your father, and come. Also regard not your stuff, for the good of all the land of Egypt is yours. He's saying, oh, your family's going to come down here? Great. All right, your horses are, I'll give you the best of my horses. We'll hook them up to a bunch of wagons. Go up there and get everything. In fact, you can even leave some of your old stuff there. I've got all this wonderful stuff for you when you get to Egypt. And the good of all the land is going to be here for you, and I'm going to put you in the best land here. Wow. The good of all the land of Egypt was made available to Joseph's family. Genesis 46, verse 1. And Israel took his journey with all that he had. He came to Beersheba. He offered sacrifice unto the God of his father Isaac. And God spake unto Israel in the visions of the night and said, Jacob, Jacob. And he said, here am I. And he said, I am God, the God of thy father. Fear not to go down into Egypt, for I will there make of thee a great nation. Now, this is very important for God to reassure him, because they were supposed to come to the promised land, and that promised land is supposed to be where they were promised to own and live and all of that. So him leaving it, remember, Abraham wouldn't send Isaac. He had to send a servant to go get him a wife. Now, Jacob went on his own because he had to, because his other brother did not care much for him, Esau. And there would have been major problems. But 20 years later, things worked out. So this was a big deal for God to reassure Jacob. It was good. It was okay. It was safe to come into the land of Egypt. And not only that, while you're there, I'm going to make you a great nation. There's 75 of them now. 75 coming in, but you got Joseph and his wife and his 2 kids too. But anyway, 75 came in, and from there, they will be a great nation. When they leave, it will be about 2.5 million. And that's over about a 215-year period, okay? I will go down with you into Egypt, and I will also surely bring you up again. You're going to go to Egypt, and I'm going to bring you back up again sometime. And Joseph shall put his hand upon thy eyes. Now, what this means is that someone, when the person dies, closes their eyes. Usually it's the eldest son or the one that the father loved the most, or was the one that was the dearest to him. So what does he do? God tells Jacob, again, a very comforting thought. Joseph shall put his hand upon thy eyes. He'll be the one to carry on for you and will close your eyes. God made it known to Jacob, to Israel, that he would be with his people and he would take care of them and that they would prosper in Egypt. Genesis 47, verse 5. And Pharaoh spoke unto Joseph and said, thy father and thy brethren are come unto thee. The land of Egypt is before thee. In the best of the land make thy father and brethren to dwell. Isn't that tremendous? Joseph was like a father to Pharaoh, and when his family showed up, Pharaoh said, you can stay, we're going to give you the best of the land. It's the land of Goshen in the Nile Delta, very fertile. Dwell there. And if thou know any men of activity among you, then make them rulers over my cattle. Since you guys are very good at what you do, take care of my herds too. And Joseph brought in Jacob his father and set him before Pharaoh. And Jacob blessed Pharaoh. What meekness Pharaoh had, that he allowed Jacob, the father of the once slave Joseph, bless him. That's a big deal, to get the blessings of God from Jacob. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. His name was changed to Israel. Verse 11, and Joseph placed his father and his brother and gave them a possession in the land of Egypt, in the best of the land. Hey, he made it available. They took it. The land of Ramses, as Pharaoh had commanded. And Joseph nourished his father and his brethren and all of his father's household with bread according to their families. And there was no bread in all the land, for the famine was very sore, so that the land of Egypt and all the land of Canaan fainted by reason of the famine. God had made sure that his people would be well fed during a lengthy 7-year famine. Genesis 50, verse 19. And Joseph said unto them, fear not, for am I in the place of God? This is after Jacob dies, and his brothers are afraid that he's going to seek vengeance. And he said, look, but as for you, you thought evil against me, but God meant it unto good. God turned the situation around. It wasn't pleasant at the time, but God turned it around. God meant it unto good, to bring to pass, as it is this day, to save much people alive. Now, therefore, fear ye not. I will nourish you and your little ones. And he comforted them and spake kindly unto them. And Joseph dwelt in Egypt, he and his father's house, and Joseph lived 110 years. So 80 of that 215 years that they were there, they were well taken care of. And Joseph saw Ephraim's children of the 3rd generation. The children also of Machir, the son of Manasseh, was brought up upon Joseph's knees. And in Exodus 1:7, and the children of Israel were fruitful, and the children of Israel increased abundantly, just like God had told Jacob was going to happen. And they multiplied, and they waxed exceeding mighty, and the land was filled with them. And the word filled in the Septuagint, the Greek word, is pletho, filled to overflowing. The Israelites were everywhere. The land was filled to overflowing with them. Now, Moses later leads God's people into the wilderness, and because of their unbelief, it would be 40 years before they could enter into the promised land because of their unbelief toward God, because they sided with the worldly facts over the promise of God. They got sentenced to life in the desert without parole. Their hardness was a result of their actions and unbelief towards the goodness of God. Hebrews 3, verse 7. Wherefore, as the Holy Spirit says, today, if you will hear his voice, harden not your hearts. This is a command. This is addressed to the church today for people living. Harden not your hearts, as in the provocation or in the rebellion during the day of the temptation in the wilderness. Don't act like they did. Don't harden your heart. Don't be rebellious. When your fathers tempted me, when they proved me, they saw my works 40 years while they were in the wilderness. Wherefore, I was angry with that generation and said, they do always err. They're always being led astray. Where? In their heart. Not good. And they have not known my ways. So I swore in my wrath, they shall not enter into my rest. Even though they were led astray in heart and did not know God's ways, which led to hardness of heart, God did not forsake them in the wilderness. He still met every need. He supplied healthy, nourishing food in the form of manna, water, quails, protection, the best earthly law given by God himself to govern them by. He supplied leadership. In fact, the greatest leader the world has ever seen until Jesus Christ. Leadership that also consisted of judges with God's Spirit on them to help mediate grievances. They chose to be hard-hearted rather than being thankful for everything God did for them. Today, God still will never leave or forsake his righteous ones. Chapter 13 of Hebrews 5 and 6, we'll look at the working translation of these two verses. Be satisfied with what you have, without a various behavior, without craving and lusting for more, and having your behavior follow that way. For he has said in Deuteronomy 31:6, I shall never ever leave you. I shall never ever ever forsake you. This is what God is saying to his people today. I shall never ever leave you. I shall never ever ever forsake you. So you can confidently say from Psalm 118:6, the Lord is my helper. I shall not be afraid. What will man do unto me? What can man do to me? The Lord's my helper. Why should I be afraid? Matthew 6:33, another great promise. So what do? Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and everything else is going to be added unto you. You see, there's no asterisk to these verses that say that God cannot help if you are in captivity. Sorry, you're in captivity. I can't supply your need anymore. Can't take care of you. Can't protect you. Can't prosper you. No, it's the exact opposite. You listen and obey and do what God wants you to do, and God will do all of that. He will not forsake you. He will meet your every need. You know, there were many Christians in the Roman Empire that were slaves. In fact, the book of Philemon deals with the Christian brotherly love between a slave owner, Philemon, and his runaway, recently converted slave Onesimus. Great record. 2 Kings 5. Here's a short record, but I think it's really loaded here. 2 Kings 5:1. Now Naaman, captain of the host of the king of Syria, was a great man with his master, and honorable, because by him the Lord had given deliverance unto Syria, and he was also a mighty man in valor. But he had one small problem. He was a leper. And the Syrians had gone out by companies and had brought away captive out of the land of Israel a little maid, and she waited on Naaman's wife. So the Syrians had gone, captured some from Israel, and one of them was a little maid, and her assignment in captivity was to take care of the wife of Naaman. That was her job. And she said unto her mistress, she knew Naaman had a disease, but she so cared. She so had great faith in God that she said to her mistress, "Would God my Lord were with the prophet that was in Samaria, for he would recover him out of his leprosy." She had great confidence in the prophet that the prophet could deliver Naaman from his leprosy. And one went in then and told his Lord, saying, "Thus and thus said the maid that's in the land of Israel, that is of the land of Israel." And the king of Syria said, "Go, I'll send a letter to the king of Israel." And he departed and took with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 pieces of gold, 10 changes of raiment. But this little maid, she was of God's people, Israel. She had been taken captive in battle. Still, she wasn't hard-hearted. She wasn't rebellious. She was very kind and loving and wanted to see the master delivered. So she opened her mouth and she spoke truth about what was available from a prophet of the true God. Her worldly master Naaman did get delivered of his leprosy. And we've got this young maid, this little maid who was of the children of Israel, who spoke up and just declared what was available from the true God. Now Ezekiel was a priest and a prophet who ministered during the dark days in Judah's history, the 70-year period of the Babylonian captivity. Carried to Babylon before the final assault on Jerusalem, he used prophecies, parables, signs, and symbols to dramatize God's message to his exiled people. Though they are like dried bones in the sun, God will reassemble them and breathe life into the nation once again. Present judgment will be followed by future glory, so that you shall know that I am the God. I am the Lord. In fact, I'm the only true one. So Ezekiel, chapter 6, verse 6, let's look at him. He's a priest and a prophet. He has to prophesy at this time. In all of your dwelling places, Ezekiel 6:6, the city shall be laid waste, and the high places shall be desolate, that your altars may be laid waste and made desolate, and your idols may be broken and cease, and your images may be cut down, and your works may be abolished. And that's what the king should have done. He should have oversaw, the high priest should have done all that to get rid of it. But once they're taken into captivity, all of their idolatry was destroyed. And the slain shall fall in the midst of you, and you shall know that I am the Lord. Yet will I leave a remnant, that you may have some that shall escape the sword among the nations, when you shall be scattered through the countries. And they that escape of you shall remember me among the nations, whether they shall be carried captives. Because I am broken with their whorish heart, which hath departed from me, and with their eyes which go whoring after their idols, and they shall loathe themselves for the evils which they have committed in all their abominations. And they shall know that I am the Lord. And they shall know that I have what I've said. I didn't say it in vain, that I would do this evil unto them. It's going to come to pass. They brought it on themselves. So Ezekiel prophesies from Babylon before the fall of Jerusalem. He had been taken into captivity during the reign of Jehoiachin. Even in captivity, though, God sent his messengers to Israel for them to hear that they would not be forsaken and that they should repent. Ezekiel 1:1. Let's go back to the beginning of the book. Now it came to pass in the 30th year, in the 4th month, in the 5th day of the month, as I was among the captives by the river of Shebar. He was among the captives. He was taken in captivity with the great host of the children of Israel. And while I was there, the heavens opened, and I saw visions of God. And in the 5th of the month, which is the 5th year of King Jehoiachin's captivity, the word of the Lord came expressly unto Ezekiel the priest, the son of Buzi, in the land of the Chaldeans by the river Shebar, and the hand of the Lord was there upon him. So Ezekiel is commissioned as a prophet to speak to God's people while in Babylon. He's a captive, but he has got the Spirit of God, and he's going to speak on God's behalf while the nation's in captivity. Ezekiel 2:1. He's commissioned as a prophet to speak to God's people while in Babylon. And he said unto me, Son of man, stand under thy feet. I'm going to speak unto you. And the Spirit entered into me, and he spake unto me, and he set me upon my feet, that I heard him that spake unto me. And he said unto me, Son of man, I send thee to the children of Israel. So Ezekiel's commissioned to who? The children of Israel. But I'm going to send you to a rebellious nation that has rebelled against me. They and their fathers have transgressed against me even unto this very day. For they're impudent children, they're stiff-hearted. I do send thee unto them, and thou shalt say unto them, thus says the Lord God. How would you like that assignment? You're in captivity, you're being sent to the children of Israel, and he's telling you the people you're going to address, what they're going to be like. Rebellious nation, transgressed against me, impudent children, stiff-hearted. But you're going, and they, whether they hear or whether they will forbear, for they are rebellious house, yet shall know that there has been a prophet among them. They can't blame God for not continuing to warn them even in captivity. You are being sent, and your job is to speak. Whether they believe or not, that's not up to you. You speak what I want spoken, so they know that I sent a prophet. And thou, son of man, be not afraid of them, neither be afraid of their words, though briars and thorns be with thee, and thou dost dwell among scorpions. Be not afraid of their words, nor be dismayed at their looks, though they be a rebellious house. Thou shalt speak my words unto them, whether they hear, whether they will forbear, for they are most rebellious. But thou, son of man, hear what I say unto thee. Be not thou rebellious, like that rebellious house. Open thy mouth and eat, that I eat of what I'm going to give you. And when I looked, behold, a hand was sent unto me, and a roll of a book was therein. And he spread it before me, and it was written within and without, and there was written therein lamentations and mourning and woe. He's to eat the words that were sent to him, and they're great words. They're words of lamentations, mourning, and woe. That's not really good, is that? That's what he has to eat, and that's what he has to communicate to this rebellious people. But don't be afraid of them. Chapter 3, Ezekiel gets commissioned as a watchman. Moreover, verse 1, he said unto me, Son of man, eat that thou findest, eat this roll, and then go speak unto the house of Israel. So I opened my mouth, and he caused me to eat the roll. And he said unto me, Son of man, cause thy belly to eat, and fill thy bowels with this roll that I give thee. Then did I eat, and it was in my mouth as honey for sweetness. And he said unto me, Son of man, go, get thou unto the house of Israel, and speak with my words unto them. For thou art not sent to a people of a strange speech or a hard language, but you are sent to the house of Israel. He's not being sent to the Babylonians. He does not have to learn their language. This is his people. He speaks their language. He knows their idioms. Go, not to many people of a strange speech and of a hard language, whose words thou canst not understand. Surely I sent thee to them, they would have hearkened unto thee. But the house of Israel will not hearken unto thee, for they will not hearken unto me. For all the house of Israel are impudent and hard-hearted. Behold, I have made thy face strong against their faces, and thy forehead strong against their foreheads. As an adamant harder than flint have I made thy forehead. Fear them not, neither be dismayed at their looks, though they be a rebellious house. When he speaks to them, they're not going to look and take very kindly to what he has to say. Moreover, he said unto me, Son of man, all my words that I shall speak unto thee, receive in thine heart, and hear with thy ears. And go, get these to them of the captivity. So he's talking to the children who were taken into captivity. Go to them, go to the children of my people, speak unto them and tell them, thus says the Lord God, whether they will hear or whether they will forbear. Then the Spirit took me up, and I heard behind me a voice of a great rushing, saying, Blessed be the glory of the Lord from his place. I heard also the noise of the wings of the living creatures that touched one another, and the noise of the wheels over against them, and a noise of a great rushing. So the Spirit lifted me up and took me away, and I went in bitterness in the heart of my spirit, but the hand of the Lord was strong upon me. See, he did what he needed to do. God needed a prophet. Ezekiel became that prophet, and he spoke. Was that a a joyous thing for him? No. He was to speak. God gave him the words. He was to speak all the words and not be afraid of them, not fear them. And it wasn't up to him whether they believed or not. Let's look at Daniel. Daniel had been carried away into captivity to Babylon earlier than Ezekiel during the reign of Jehoiakim. He and his companions have to make a choice that could cost them their lives early on in their captivity. Daniel 1:1. It's the third year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah. Came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, unto Jerusalem, and he besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, with part of the vessels of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar, to the house of his God. And he brought the vessels into the treasure house of his God. And the king spake unto Aspenance, the master of the eunuchs, that he should bring certain of the children of Israel, and of the king's seed, and of the princes, children in whom there was no blemish, well favored, skillful in all wisdom, and cunning in knowledge and understanding science, as such as had ability in them to stand in the king's palace, and whom they might teach the learning and tongue of the Chaldeans. They were already well advanced in their education. And the king appointed them a daily provision of the king's meat and of the wine which he drank. So nourishing them 3 years, or in a 3-year program, that at the end of those days they're going to stand before the king. Now among these were the children of Judah, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, unto whom the prince of the eunuchs gave Babylonian names to them. For he gave Daniel the name of Belteshazzar. Hananiah he called him Shadrach, and Mishael he called Meshach, and Azariah he called him Abednego. But Daniel purposed in his heart, he made up his mind that he would not defile himself. He knew what the Mosaic law said. He knew what he could eat and what he couldn't eat. And if they offered him bacon, he couldn't eat bacon. He couldn't eat pork. These were things that were told him you can't have, according to the law. No lobster for you, no shrimp, and many other things if you've read what they could or couldn't eat in the Old Testament. But Daniel made up his mind. I'm not going to defile myself. I'm going to eat only what God has said in the law. I won't defile myself with the portion of the king's meat. Not going to drink his wine. Therefore, he requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. Now, that's pretty bold. He requested of the top man, the one who's going to train all of them, teach all of them, feed all of them. He went straight to him and requested, I cannot defile myself. Now, God had brought Daniel into favor and tender love with the prince of eunuchs. Somewhere along the line, these two had developed a relationship already. And the prince of the eunuchs said unto Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who has appointed your food and your drink. For why should he see your faces worse liking than the children which are of your sort? Then shall you make me endanger my head to the king. I can't just let you skate, and if you look bad, it's me who's going to pay. Then said Daniel to Melzar, whom the prince of the eunuchs had set over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, prove thy servants, I beseech you, for 10 days. Just give us pulse. This is some kind of great vegetables and things that just are better to eat than what everybody else was going to be getting, healthier. Just give us the pulse and give us just water to drink. Then let our countenance be looked upon before thee, and the countenance of the children that eat the portion of the king's meat. And as thou seest, you can deal with us then. So he consented unto this matter. He said, look, you got 10 days. In 10 days, all right? So at the end of the 10 days, their countenance appeared fairer and fatter and fleshed than all the children which did eat the portion of the king's meat. So 10 days, he lined them up and went, oh, wow, you guys look great. Then Melzar took away the portion of their meat, took their wine away. Okay, you don't get this stuff. You just get pulse. You're just getting your vegetables. That's it, young man. All these 3 guys. You know, God must know something about nutrition, huh? As for the 4 children, God is now involved. And God gives them knowledge, gives them skill in all learning and wisdom. And also they added Daniel had understanding of visions and dreams. Now, at the end of the days that the king had said he should bring them in, then the prince of the eunuchs brought them in, marched them in before Nebuchadnezzar, lined them up. And the king asked them questions. And, he communed with them. And among all of them was found none who were top of the class, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore stood they before the king. And in all matters of wisdom and all matters of understanding that the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and astrologers that were in his realm. And Daniel continued even in the first year of Cyrus. 10 times better, better than the ones who had been working for him, that had been there for years. They knew so much more, and they were so much smarter in wisdom and understanding. Chapter 2, verse 13. Okay, the king has a dream. Nobody can handle it. So he says, kill all the wise men. And the decree went forth that the wise men would be slain. So they looked for Daniel and his fellows to slay him. And Daniel said, whoa, 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 wait a minute, Arioch. But he answered, not huffy, not arrogantly. He answered with counsel and wisdom to Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, which was gone forth to slay the wise men of Babylon. He answered and said to Arioch, the king's captain, why is the decree so hasty from the king? Then Arioch made the thing known to Daniel. And Daniel said, okay, hold on, let me go see him. And Daniel went in and desired of the king that he would give him time, and that he would show the king the interpretation. Right? Just give me some time. I'll be back shortly with the answers. Daniel demonstrates great trust in God to boldly declare that he would learn the interpretation. Because Pharaoh had said, look, I had a dream and I forgot the dream. So you got to tell me the dream, then you got to tell me the interpretation. And nobody said they could do that. Well, the true God could. And Daniel knew he could. Verse 17. So Daniel went to his house and he explained to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions, what's going on. And then he asked them, that they, all these guys needed to desire the mercies of God of heaven concerning this secret, that Daniel and his fellows should not perish with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. So why should they die? They have a connection with the true God. And so he told them all about it. They all prayed and kept praying. Then was the secret revealed unto Daniel in a night vision. Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. He didn't, put it through his mind, say, I'm going to extract lots of great things from the king. No, he just blessed God. And Daniel answered and said, blessed be the name of God forever and ever, for wisdom and might are his. And he changed the times of the seasons. He removes kings and sets up kings. He gives wisdom unto the wise and knowledge to them that knows understanding. He reveals the deep and secret things. He knows what is in the darkness, and the light dwells with him. I thank thee and praise thee, O thou God of my fathers, who has given me wisdom and might, and has made me known, but has made known unto me now what we desired of thee. We asked, we prayed, you answered our prayer. You gave us the knowledge we need, for thou hast now made known unto us the king's matter. Therefore Daniel went into Arioch, whom the king had ordained to destroy the wise men of Babylon, and he went and said, destroy not the wise men of Babylon. Stop the presses, right? Bring me in before the king, and I will show unto the king the interpretation. Then Arioch brought in Daniel before the king in haste, because he's having to delay all of this stuff. I'll get to him in a minute, king. This guy may know something. And he said thus unto him, I have found the man of the captives of Judah that will make known unto the king the interpretation. The king answered and said to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, are you able to make known unto me the dream which I have seen? And then you can give me the interpretation? Daniel answered in the presence of the king and said, the secret which the king has demanded. Wait a minute. What about all these wise men and your astrologers and magicians and soothsayers? Can't they give you? Can't they help you? Can't they answer this? I always like it when they jab the adversary's people in situations like this. How come they're not giving you the answer? And then he says, but there is a God in heaven that reveals secrets and makes known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the latter days. Thy dream and the visions of thy head upon thy bed are these. As for thee, O king, thy thoughts came into thy mind upon thy bed, what should come to pass hereafter. And he that reveals secrets makes known to thee what shall come to pass. But as for me, This secret is not revealed to me for any wisdom that I have more than any living, but for their sakes that shall make known the interpretation of the king, and that thou mightest know the thoughts of thy heart. And again, we see the meekness of Daniel. This isn't because I'm so wise that I can use it to my advantage. It wasn't revealed for me. It's been revealed by the true God, the God of heaven, to help you to understand what's coming. Verse 46, after he explained it to him, then the king Nebuchadnezzar fell on his face. This is a mighty king, and he is showing quite the meekness. And he worshiped Daniel and commanded that they should offer an oblation and sweet odors unto him. And the king answered unto Daniel and said, of a truth it is that your God is a God of gods. How little he knew. And a Lord of kings and a revealer of secrets, seeing thou couldst reveal this secret. Then the king made Daniel a great man. This man's in captivity. But the king, the top man in this huge empire, is going to make Daniel a great man, and gave him many great gifts, made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon, and chief of the governors over all the wise men of Babylon. And then Daniel spoke up and requested of the king that he set Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon. But Daniel sat in the gate of the king. He wanted these three to deal with the day-by-day activity. Meanwhile, he would answer directly to the king. All right, Daniel chapter 3, verse 26. Before we get that, utilizing the Spirit from God, Daniel made known to the king the dream and its meaning. Then he and his countrymen were all promoted. They were soon tested to yield on the very first commandment of worshiping the true God only. Or if they decided they weren't going to worship, they were going to be tossed into a burning fiery furnace. That's usually not a good place to get a suntan. After they refused to bow, they saw the fruit of their stand for the one true God. So we may burn, but we're not going to bow. And Nebuchadnezzar was not happy, threw them in, and then nothing happened to them. Verse 26 of chapter 3. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the mouth of the burning fiery furnace. He spoke, and he saw Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He said, you servants of the Most High God, come forth, come hither. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth and climbed up the ladder out of the midst of the fire. And the princes, governors, and captains, and the king's counselors being gathered together saw these men. They saw them being tossed in, and they saw them coming out, upon whose bodies the fire had no power, nor was a hair of their head singed, neither were their coats changed, nor the smell of fire had passed on them. Then Nebuchadnezzar spake and said, blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants that trusted in him. And that was the key. They stood for the one true God. They trusted that God was going to deliver them, and they weren't going to bow. Just like they didn't when it came to the food, they didn't hear it this time. No idolatry for them. They trusted in the true God, and Nebuchadnezzar saw that. And he has changed the king's word. The true God changed the king's word. The king's word, that's something. Most kings aren't that meek. They stick by what they say. And they yield their bodies that they might not serve nor worship any God except their own God. He recognized they'd taken a stand for this God. Therefore, I'm going to make a decree that every people, nation, and language would speak anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made a dunghill, because there is no other God that can deliver after this sort. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. They got quite a big raise, better housing and everything else. Got really taken care of because they stood. They didn't bow. They weren't given to idolatry. The king recognized that. God protected them. And the end result was they not only were alive, they got promoted. God took care of his people in captivity. He's taking care of these guys greatly because they're taking a stand for him. And they're showing other people. This is going out to every people, nation, and language about this God. All right, Daniel 6, verse 1. It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 princes, which should be over the whole kingdom, and over these 3 presidents, of whom Daniel was first, that the princes might give accounts unto them, and the king should have no damage. Then this Daniel was preferred above the presidents and princes. Why? He's number one of the 120 provinces, 120 princes, three above them, and he's number one of them. Why? Because an excellent spirit was in him. And the king thought to set him over the whole realm. I'll just let him run the whole thing. He's doing such a great job. He's got a connection with the true God. An excellent spirit was in him. Then the presidents and the princes, hey, we want to be president. How come this guy keeps doing it? We got to find some dirt on this guy. We got to figure out a way to get him. Then the presidents and the princes sought to find occasion against Daniel concerning the kingdom, but they couldn't find any occasion or fault. For as much as he was faithful, he honestly did what he was supposed to do and do his work and did it honestly. Neither was there any error. They didn't find any fault in him at all. So they reconvened and got together and said, we're not going to find. He's not cooking the books. He's not, his credit card receipts to come in are perfect. Everything just keeps lining up. What are we going to do? We're not going to find an occasion about how he does his business, but tell you what, we can find it against him concerning the law of his God. There will always be opposition. There will always be envy. There will always be evil until the end of the book. But the opposition is going to be there. And what happens in this situation? Daniel gets tossed into a den full of hungry lions whose mouth God shut. It wasn't that they weren't hungry. They were hungry. It's that God shut their mouths. Verse 24, after he survived that night, and the king commanded, and they brought those men which had accused Daniel, and they cast them into the den of lions, and they threw their children and their wives, and the lions had the mastery of them, and break all their bones in pieces, or ever they came at the bottom of the den. Before they even landed, the lions were eating them and crushing them. So they were hungry, but God forbid the lions to do anything. Then King Darius wrote to all the people, the nations, and language. Again, it gets out throughout the entire kingdom. Everybody that dwells on the earth, peace be multiplied unto you. I make a decree that in every dominion of my kingdom, men tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, and steadfast forever. In his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall be even unto the end. He delivered and rescued, and he worked signs and wonders in heaven and in earth, who hath delivered Daniel from the power of the lions. So this Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian. There are many other records we could mention. Nehemiah served in the palace as the king's cupbearer. Esther becomes queen. Her uncle Mordecai would become a high-ranking government official. Together, they would save God's people who were scattered throughout the kingdom. And we'll cover the book of Esther in great detail later to witness the rise of Mordecai and how God protected his people while they were in captivity throughout the kingdom of Persia, who had replaced the Babylonians as the rulers of this empire. So a lot more as we continue on. But the key is God can and will prosper his children. He prospered the people of Israel when they were in captivity. But those people had to have great respect for God, obey God, listen to God, act on what God wanted them to do. And they had the law and they stuck by it. We have the freedoms in Christ and all kinds of tremendous things. And our job today is to let others know about the greatness of the Christ and what he accomplished on their behalf. So God bless you, and we'll see you in segment 3.